This time on Filmmaker, we are looking at the Coens. Brothers Joel and Ethan have directed 18 films so far and are amazingly capable of doing both dark and heavy drama, as well as light, silly comedy, often at the same time. They have a style and look that feels classic, with smart dialogue and some of the best costumes and sets in the business. Critically adored and avidly followed by film nerds everywhere, the Coens take chances, and they usually deliver. So let's dive into this list and count them down. Number 18, Intolerable Cruelty. This feels the least like a Coen Brothers film of anything in their filmography. It feels like a studio film that they later became attached to, and that's because mostly it is. The film was originally meant for Ron Howard before the Coens stepped in and tweaked it to be slightly more their style. Visually, it looks like every other 90s film set in an office. Catherine Zeta-Jones feels a million miles from the quirky and interesting characters usually played by the likes of Holly Hunter and Frances McDormand. The weird story centered around divorce lawyers and wills feels like it's passed through more than a few writers. The only element that feels like it would be at home in a Coen film is George Clooney, who makes the most out of what he has. It's a perfectly passable film for heavy rotation on TBS, but it's just not really the Coens. Number 17, Ladykillers. There's no subtlety in this remake of the 1955 British classic. It's a strangely broad comedy where everyone's more cartoon character than human. This does work, however, for Tom Hanks, who's obviously having a blast as the professor, who's kind of Dirk Dastardly with a thesaurus and a love of Edgar Allan Poe. J.K. Simmons is also great as the hapless demolitions expert. However, Marlon Wayans and Ryan Hurst's characters don't work nearly as well. Some fun in the payoff, but the journey there works way too hard to be funny. Number 16, the HUDSUCKER Proxy. There is a wide-eyed, quirky optimism at the beginning of HUDSUCKER Proxy that makes it feel a little bit like a happy version of Brazil or Willy Wonka in an office. The first 30 minutes are hilarious. It has a great style, slick feel, and everything works. The elevator attendant, the suicide, the mailroom, the play-by-play at the bar, and most of all, the juxtaposition of Robbins' endless positivity and Newman's snarling cynicism. Sadly, it doesn't hold through the runtime. Jennifer Jason Leigh's character works great when she's with Bruce Campbell in the newsroom, but it wears thin in the office, and as things struggle to become more grounded, the shine kind of wears off. Number 15, Hail Caesar. Hail Caesar feels a little bit like the Coens had a bunch of great little ideas for bits about the early studio days of the movie business, but none of those ideas had enough legs on their own, so they tied them together under the larger idea of a kidnapping. The thing is, the pictures within the picture are by far the best part. Clooney's story still has highlights. Tilda Swinton is terrific in a double role as dueling reporters. Alden Ehrenreich charms the pants off of everything, and the communist kidnappers have their moments, but things really shine in the little asides that almost feel like sketches. Things like Ralph Fiennes repeating lines to the hapless cowboy and the terrifically over-the-top Channing Tatum Navy song. Not everything lands, but the things that do are knockouts. Number 14, Burn After Reading. Burn After Reading is an insane mess, which isn't just the point of the movie. It's actually mined to be one of the film's best bits, with J.K. Simmons' amazing responses to the FBI debriefings. Everyone is clearly having fun, and everyone has terrific little mini jokes that they get to play with. Clooney and his obsession with flooring, Frances McDormand's relationship with the Russians, Brad Pitt's bike locks, and Malkovich just continuously building his anger. The only problem is that sometimes that joyous messiness does get in its own way, and sometimes the jokes get a little bit self-indulgent, but overall, this is a better film than it gets credit for. Number 13, A Serious Man. Serious Man is a classic example of a movie that critics adore, but if we're being honest, isn't really that much fun to watch. It's kind of sort of a modern take on the Job story, with a lot of heavy religious undertones and overtones and questions and characters. There's no doubt that Michael Stuhlbarg is tremendous as the man quietly watching his world fall apart while wrestling with his faith, and the film looks gorgeous. The Coens have definitely done what they set out to do, and in doing so, they've created a philosophical film that can take up entire semesters of film school, but it's so frustrating to watch. It's meant to be an extreme version of reality, but it's such an uncomfortable one. No one's at all likable, and it never really lets us in, and all of that's the point, and it works. But it isn't something that you would ever watch twice. Number 12, Raising Arizona. The good stuff in Raising Arizona is more than good enough to lift the few more uneven moments in between. The first 10 minutes are so good. Everything is set up efficiently and hilariously. Nicolas Cage is at his absolute most charming. Holly Hunter feels every emotion at 11 to amazing effect. The plan sounds as reasonable as it is insane, and all of it is comedy gold, but it's a pace that would be impossible to keep up, and by the time things get to the bounty hunter, everything has loosened up just a little bit too much, and the charming weirdness starts to fall a bit flat. Still, even if the promise doesn't fully deliver, it comes plenty close enough. Number 11, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Very, very loosely based on Homer's Odyssey. In fact, the brothers later said that they haven't actually fully read the Odyssey. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou is a classic quest with some very interesting stops along the way. The three leads are terrific, especially Clooney, who's endowed to the hilt with the Coens' classic overly loquacious oratory skills. And the look is phenomenal. Interestingly, it's the first film that was entirely digitally colored, as all of the lush greenery is coated here in autumn yellows and browns. The whole thing does run out of steam a bit in the second half, however, as the boys stop traveling and start settling, but the music more than makes up for any shortcomings. Number 10, The Man Who Wasn't There. This might be the most subtle of the Coens films. It doesn't have a lot of that witty, overly eloquent, and strangely old-timey banter or weird goings-on that the brothers are known for. It's a quiet film, but a quiet man who wants to live a quiet life. Billy Bob Thornton excels as the lead, who's kind of heroically low status as he plays off of the terrific supporting performances from James Gandolfini, Tony Shalhoub, and Coen mainstay Frances McDormand. The black and white is also a terrific touch. It perfectly captures the beautiful mundanity of everything that's going on. This is one that kind of flew under the radar for a lot of people, but it's well worth tracking down. Number 9, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. Coen's Western anthology is, of course, a bit of a mixed bag, which is by design, as well as a necessary result of a script consisting of short stories written over the course of more than 2 decades. The first and last stories make for terrific bookends, in a light and dark, heaven and hell kind of way, while the 4 in the middle are a solid range, from the light James Franco bit that's mostly a setup for his hangman joke, to the heavy but beautiful meal ticket and the gorgeously shot all-gold canyon starring Tom Waits. But perhaps the most mix of the bunch is the longest entry, The Gal Who Got Rattled, which does pay off with a heartbreaking ending. It may not quite be something for everyone, but it's a lot of things for anyone who likes westerns. Number 8, Miller's Crossing. Coen's third film is one of their most straightforward movies. Unlike their later films, it isn't combining or subverting genres. It's a classic noir gangster movie through and through. It's just a very good one. The dialogue's quick, the characters are clear, the protagonist is changed in a meaningful way, and the cast of supporting characters are interesting and memorable from top to bottom. There's no wasted movement or loose pieces. It has a job to do, and it does it, thanks in large part to a strong performance from the always terrific Gabriel Byrne and direction that adds just the right touches of artistry to the hard-nosed world. Number 7, True Grit. The biggest knock against True Grit is that we didn't need it, and to be fair, the original is excellent, but the Coens do more than enough to make their version worthwhile. The Coens version puts Maddie Ross right square in the middle, and the then 13-year-old Haley Steinfeld blows the roof off. The audience is fully on board in the first 8 minutes when she talks circles around the poor stable owner, and then she manages to go toe-to-toe with Jeff Bridges in a role he got so into he still hasn't fully stopped doing the voice. Add Matt Damon to the mix and you've got a terrific central triangle in a simple and effective Western that is as good a remake as there has been. Number 6, Barton Fink. This is one of the films that really put the Coens on the radar. Barton Fink hinges on terrific performances from its leads Turturro and Goodman, as well as creating an atmosphere that is somehow equal parts mundane and terrifying. Writers writing movies about writing doesn't always pay off, but here you can feel both the existential dread of the brothers behind the real-world typewriter, as well as their love for the material, as they wrestle with the questions of high art versus commercials, selling out, and authentic authorship, as Barton falls down the well until finally writer's block and the delivery of a hack script turns into a literal hell. It also has a fantastically open ending that is one of the Coens' best closing scenes. Number 5, Blood Simple. The Coens came out of the gate with one of the absolute greatest debuts of all time. Blood Simple is a doozy of a modern crime film. Many see it as kind of the roadmap for Fargo, but I'm not sure that it's giving either film the credit it deserves. Blood Simple works so well because everything the characters do makes sense. The big picture seems extraordinary, but each one of the little steps that gets us there has a kind of insular logic. It also works because it stays intimate. There are never more than 2 characters in a scene, and the camera is rarely more than a few feet away. We see the emotions and complexity, especially with Frances McDormand, who also made her debut in this film. Number 4, The Big Lebowski. I'm sure no director's ever happy when their film doesn't do well out of the gate, but for Lebowski, it was probably the best thing that could have happened. Like the lead character, the film is more charming because it's an underachiever. It's best watched in a rowdy late-night theater or on a couch with friends and a couple of drinks, and it works because it lives up to that cool reputation. The lines are memorable and repeatable, the characters are lovable and weird and cool. It's the kind of movie that screams for dress-up nights and talk-alongs. It's perfectly cast, confidently directed, extremely well-paced, and funny from top to bottom. The dude has become a cultural icon for a reason. Number 3, Inside Llewyn Davis. Llewyn Davis is one of the best examples of form-echoing substance. The cyclical nature of the film tells us everything we need to know about the lead character, a talented artist stuck in a loop, unable to break into fame. It's kind of a heartbreaking portrait of not quite making it artists everywhere. Oscar Isaacs is so good. He has a layer of sadness and desperation just below the surface. Under false confidence and indifference, he's kind of a self-destructive scumbag, but he's also charming enough to make it believable that his friends would keep helping him. It's one of the Coens' more subtle films at every level. The visual style is modern and simple, but gorgeously melancholy, and the story's almost entirely made up of small moments, just a portrait of a life not quite lived to its full potential. It may not be as splashy or as funny as most, but it is quietly one of the best things that the Coens have ever done. Number 2, Fargo. There are a lot of films you can look at as the Coens' big break, but this is the film that solidified them at the top tier. It's a masterclass in how to interweave stories. There are at most 10 minutes total in which any pair of the leads actually share the screen. The threads all balance each other with the homey groundedness of the small-town sheriff, the foolish desperation of the hapless car dealer, and the constant anger of the would-be kidnappers turned cold-blooded murderers. It's all balanced just right, as is the mix of violence and humor, and then all of it is set just off the beaten path, with the landscape and the accent and the mundane locations and endless snow all kind of becoming characters within the film. Everything is a perfect little piece of a fantastic whole. Number 1, No Country for Old Men. This is how you make a technically sound, artistically exciting movie that is entertaining to watch. No Country for Old Men is a slow-burning, smart-as-they-come classic Western, but it never feels like it's dragging its feet, not even for a second. It's a film that commands 100% of your attention at all times. Javier Bardem is impossible to look away from. Josh Brolin is the ultimate ruggedly charming white hat. Tommy Lee Jones is of course wonderful as the wise old sheriff, and Woody Harrelson's underrated as the wild card bounty hunter. It's all of the elements that we would expect from a Western, but with that something more that comes from the terrific story by Cormac McCarthy and the skill of the Coens. It also helps that there are some real legitimate twists and turns that we do not see coming that serve to keep the audience on its toes for the full 2 hours. For directors who are known for their incredible dialogue and period settings, it's interesting that their very best work came from stripping all of that away and just telling a heck of a great cowboy story. And that is it. I know that the Coens have some hardcore fans, so I'm interested to see what everyone's top few films are and which ones you think I've maybe got a little bit too low in the mix. Let me know in the comments, and as always, please do like and subscribe, and hopefully I will see you all next time.